Carbon dating has reshaped how we understand ancient history. It has dated scrolls, temples, cities, and sacred texts across the ancient world with remarkable precision. But when it comes to Mecca, something unusual happens. There is no carbon-dated evidence tying the city to its claimed ancient sacred past. No early layers, no datable structures, no material trail reaching back to the time it is said to begin. At the same time, carbon dating does tell us a story elsewhere about early Islamic manuscripts, inscriptions and buildings emerging later than tradition assumes. This video isn't about attacking Mecca. It's about following the evidence and asking why the most sacred city of Islam exists outside the archaeological timeline. Islamic tradition presents Mecca as one of the oldest and most sacred city on earth. According to later Islamic sources, its holiness does not begin with Muhammad. It begins with Abraham. Islam teaches that Abraham and his son Ishmael traveled to Mecca by divine command and built the Kaaba as the first house dedicated to the worship of the one true God. The Quran describes the Kaaba as the first house appointed for mankind and places Mecca at the center of God's plan for humanity. Pilgrimage to the Kaaba is portrayed not as a new Islamic practice, but as a restoration of ancient Abrahamic worship. Within this framework, Mecca is said to have been a monotheistic sanctuary long before Islam. Paganism is explained as a later corruption of Abraham's original faith. Islamic tradition holds that the Kaaba remained standing for centuries, even millennia, accumulating idols over time, but never losing its sacred status. Muhammad's role is presented as a reformer who cleansed the sanctuary and returned Mecca to its original purpose. Islam also claims that Mecca was a major pilgrimage and religious center throughout antiquity. Tribes across Arabia are said to have traveled there regularly, recognizing its spiritual authority even before Islam. This is used to explain why Mecca held such influence in Muhammad's lifetime and why control of the city was so significant. Later, Islamic biographies and historical works go further. They describe Mecca as a key trade hub, positioned along major caravan routes linking southern Arabia with the Levant. Its prosperity and prominence are presented as long-established facts, helping to explain how a city in a barren valley could rise to religious and economic importance. Taken together, these claims form a coherent narrative. Carbon dating is one of the most reliable tools historians use to establish when something existed. It does not interpret theology, legends, or belief. It measures the age of organic material, wood, parchment, bone, textiles, and places it within a scientifically defined time range. When archaeological material is available, carbon dating anchors history to an actual timeline. Across the ancient world, carbon dating has done exactly that. In Jerusalem, organic remains from multiple periods, wooden beams, seeds, textiles and scrolls, have been carbon dated to confirm occupation layers from the Bronze Age through the Second Temple period. The Dead Sea Scrolls, found at Qumran, were radiocarbon dated to the centuries before and around the time of Jesus, confirming that biblical texts existed long before later religious movements. In Babylon and Nineveh, carbon dating of organic material from destruction layers and construction phases aligns with Assyrian and Babylonian chronologies already known from inscriptions. These dates help confirm when cities rose, fell, and were rebuilt. At Petra, the Nabatean capital, carbon dating of wooden beams, burial remains, and habitation layers confirms sustained occupation centuries before Islam. In Egypt, carbon dating has anchored temples, manuscripts, and settlements across millennia. The pattern is consistent. Ancient religious centers leave behind datable traces. carbon dating does not prove belief systems. It confirms presence, continuity, and development. It shows when people lived somewhere, when structures were built, and when texts were written. When a city or sanctuary claims ancient and continuous sacred use, archaeology normally provides at least some material that can be tested. Even when excavation is limited, surrounding regions usually produce datable evidence that anchors the tradition in time. This is why carbon dating matters in historical discussion. It establishes timelines where claims can be checked against physical reality. And it is precisely this standard expectation that makes Mecca's situation unusual. Despite its central role in Islamic belief, Mecca has produced no carbon-dated archaeological material that confirms its claimed sacred history before late antiquity. There are no securely dated pre-Islamic habitation layers beneath the Kaaba. There are no carbon-dated construction materials tied to an Abrahamic period. There are no pre-Islamic inscriptions from Mecca itself that identify it as a monotheistic sanctuary. This absence is not because archaeology has disproven Mecca's claims. It is because archaeology cannot currently test them at all. Mecca is one of the most restricted archaeological zones in the world. Large-scale excavation is prohibited. Modern construction has dramatically altered the ancient landscape. As a result, there is no stratified record that allows historians to examine continuous occupation, cultic use, or architectural development over long periods of time. But the silence goes beyond the city itself. Outside Mecca, there is also a lack of independent ancient references to the city before late antiquity. Greek, Roman, Persian, and South Arabian sources that describe Arabian trade routes, pilgrimage centers, and major cities do not clearly identify Mecca as a significant religious or commercial hub in the centuries when Islamic tradition places it at the center of Abrahamic worship. This is striking, especially when compared to other Arabian sites that appear repeatedly in external records. That does not automatically make Islamic tradition false, but it does mean that the tradition rests almost entirely on later narrative, not on material confirmation. Carbon dating, which has anchored the timelines of so many ancient cities, has nothing to work with in Mecca's early period. In archaeology, silence is not proof, but it is still data. And when the most sacred city of a religion exists almost entirely outside the archaeological record for the period it claims to begin, historians are left with a serious and unavoidable question. Why does Mecca stand alone without the kind of material evidence that anchors every other ancient sacred city in time? While Mecca's early past remains archaeologically silent, carbon dating has produced clear, testable timelines for early Islamic material outside Mecca. One of the most important cases is the Sana palimpsest, discovered in Yemen in 1972. Radiocarbon testing dates the parchment to the late 6th to mid-7th century. The manuscript contains an erased lower text and a revised upper text, showing that the Quranic text was still undergoing development and correction during Islam's earliest period. The significance is not theological disagreement, but historical reality. The Quran existed in material form within time, not outside it. The Birmingham Quran manuscript provides another anchor. Carbon dating places its parchment between 568 and 645 AD. This confirms that Quranic material emerges around Muhammad's lifetime, not centuries later. But it also shows that the physical Quran appears within a narrow historical window, not as an ancient artifact stretching back into deep antiquity. Islam teaches that the Quran was preserved perfectly and completely through oral transmission from the moment of revelation, and that the written text merely recorded what was already fixed and unchanged in memory. If that were the whole story, we would expect two things. 1. Uniformity in the earliest written fragments. 2. No evidence of textual development, but when the Birmingham manuscript is viewed alongside other early material, especially the Sana palimpsest, a more complex picture emerges. The Birmingham leaves represent a stable written form, but they do not stand alone. Other early manuscripts show variations in wording, differences in verse order, corrections and overwriting, multiple consonantal forms. This tells us something important. Oral transmission did not prevent early textual fluidity. In other words, memorization existed, but it did not freeze the text instantly and universally. So again, there is no carbon-dated material tying Mecca to its Abrahamic narrative due to the absence of excavation. And that raises the obvious question, why not prove it? If Mecca truly goes back to Abraham as Islam claims, proving parts of that should be easy. Excavation, carbon dating and material evidence would confirm claims of the Quran. Yet no such proof has ever been produced. What could be tested has never been tested. History is not just decided by what people believe, but by what can be examined. And when evidence consistently appears everywhere else but not here, the question becomes unavoidable. Why does the most sacred city of Islam exist outside the archaeological timeline that anchors every other ancient sacred center? Thanks for watching. All sources and references are listed in the description below.